With our test suite in place, it's now time to create our second route, the get to-dos route, which will be responsible for returning all of your to-dos. And this would be useful for any to-do application. The first screen you're probably going to show a user is a list of all of their to-dos. This is the route you would use to get that information. It's going to be a get request. So I'm going to use app.get to register the route handler. And the URL itself is going to match the URL we have above. It's going to be get/to-dos because we want to get all of the to-dos. Later on, when we get an individual to-do, the URL will look something like this. But for now, we're going to match it with the post URL. Next up, we can add our callback. This is going to give us our request and response objects. And inside of here, we can get started. All we need to do is get all of the to-dos in the collection. And we actually already did that in the test file. Inside of server.test.js, we used to-do find to fetch all of the to-dos. We're going to use that same technique right here. To-do.find. We're not passing in a query. We want to return everything. Later on, when we add authentication, you'll get back just the to-dos you created. But for now, without authentication, you're going to get everything in the to-dos collection back. Next up, we're going to attach a then call. This then call is going to take two functions, the success case function when the promise gets resolved, and a function that gets fired when the promise gets rejected. Now the success case will get called with all of the to-dos, and all we're going to do is send that information back using response.send. We could pass in the to-dos array like this, but this is not the best way to get the job done. When you pass back an array, you're kind of locking yourself down. If you want to add on another property, whether it's a custom status code or some other data, you can't because you have an array. The better solution would be to create an object, and on that object specify to-dos, setting it equal to the to-dos array using ES6. This would let you add other properties later on. For example, I could add some sort of custom status code, setting it equal to whatever I like. By using an object as opposed to sending an array back, we're opening ourselves up to a more flexible future. With this in place, our success case is good to go. The only thing we need to do to wrap this one up is handle errors. And the error handler is going to look exactly like the one we have above. Response.status, we're going to be sending back a 400, and we'll be sending back the error object that got passed in to the function. Now that we have this in place, we can go ahead and start up our server and test things out over inside of Postman. I'm going to fire up the server using node server, server.js. And inside of Postman, we can get started by creating some to-dos. Currently, our application and the tests for the application use the same database. The before each call we ran in the last video unfortunately wiped everything, which means we have no data to fetch. The first thing I'm going to do in Postman is try to fetch the data. We should get back an empty array, which should still work. The URL is going to be localhost 3000/to-dos, and it is indeed going to be a GET request. I can click send. This is going to fire off the request, and right here we get our data back. We have an object, we have our to-dos property, and we have our empty array, which is expected. Now, as you've noticed, manually configuring a route every single time you want to use it gets pretty tedious, and we're going to be using a lot of the same routes over and over again. With Postman, we can actually create a collection of routes so we can refire requests without having to manually enter all this information. Over on the right-hand side, I can click the drop-down arrow next to save and click Save As. Here I can give my request a little bit of detail. I'm going to change the request name to get/to-dos. This is the naming convention I like to use, the HTTP method followed by the URL. We can leave the description blank for now, and down below we can create a new collection since we don't have any. The Postman Echo collection is an example collection Postman gives you to explore this feature. We're going to make one called To-Do App. Now, anytime we want to run that command, all we do is we go to collections, we click Get To-Dos, we click Send, and the request fires. Let's go ahead and set up a post request to create a to-do, and then we'll run that, we'll save it, and we'll rerun get to make sure it returns the newly created to-do. To create the post request, if you remember, we do have to change the method to post, and the URL will be the same, localhost 3000/to-dos. Now, in order for this request to succeed, we also have to pass along a body. This one is going to be a raw JSON body. Right here, we can specify the data we'd like to send. In this case, the only data property we're going to send is text. And I'll set this to something to do from Postman. Now we can go ahead and fire this off, and down below we get our newly created to-do with a 200 status code, which means everything went well. We can save this to our collection so we can easily rerun this one later. I'm going to change the request name to post/todos following that same syntax. Then down below, I can select an existing collection, the to-do app collection, and save it. Now I can simply click the request, use Command Enter, or click the send button to fire off the request. And down below, I get my to-dos array and everything looks great. I can always click post to add a second one. I can tweak it if I like, adding the number 2. Then I can use Command Return to fire that one off. I can rerun the GET request, and I have my 2 to-dos in the database. With this in place, our GET to-dos request is now complete. We also set up our collection in Postman, making it really easy to fire off any of these HTTP requests much faster. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this video up by making a commit over in the terminal. I'm going to shut the server down and run git status. And this time around, you see we just have one file and it is modified, which means instead of using git add, we can simply use git commit with the A flag. The A flag adds all modified files to the next commit. It does not work for new untracked files, but modified files are perfectly fine. And then I can tack on the M flag to specify my commit message. A good one for this will be add get to-dos route. Excellent. Last up, we're going to push it up to GitHub, and now we are done. I will see you in the next video where we write test cases for get to-dos. It's coming up next, so stay tuned. I will see you then.